Hello and welcome to the Feeling Good podcast. I am your host, Fabrice Nye, and joining me here in the Murrieta studios is Dr. David Burns. Hi, David.
Hi, Fabrice.
Dr. David Burns has been a pioneer in the development of cognitive therapy, and he is the creator of the new team therapy. He is the author of Feeling Good, which has sold over 5 million copies in the United States and has been translated into over 20 languages. He is an emeritus adjunct clinical professor of psychiatry at the Stanford University School of Medicine. Welcome to episode 74 of the Feeling Good podcast. And we're going to start a new series today called The 5 Simple Ways to Boost Your Happiness. And I want to give a preview of coming attractions because we will complete the series by talking about the 5 secrets of effective communication. I know some people have asked for more advanced techniques. So in that last episode of the series, we'll have a live demo of the 5 secrets with somebody who's trying to do some work on relationships. But to start with, you had something that you wanted to present on. You wanted to talk about the pleasure predicting sheet. Is that right?
Yeah. Today, number 1, the first thing will be specific and use the pleasure predicting sheet, and then the other 4 in approximate order. We might change the orders of them, but probably number 2 will be stop procrastinating. Do something you've been putting off, and we'll talk about the anti-procrastination sheet.
Yeah.
The third episode will have to do with confronting a fear. Mm-hmm. Number 4 will have to do with boosting self-esteem with the daily mood log and crushing some of the negative thoughts that rob us of self-esteem, such as I'm a failure, I'm not good enough, things like this that plague so many people. And then episode number 5 will be, resolve a conflict with someone you're not getting along with.
What could be a good challenge for the listeners who are willing to take it on is each week to try to implement each one of those ways.
Absolutely.
And see how they feel after 5 weeks.
Yeah, that sounds good. Now, just a couple quick general philosophical issues about boosting your happiness.
Yeah.
And
what is happiness?
Well, that's another philosophical point. I'll let you answer that after we address the four simple ones. But one of them is that if you've been, struggling with depression and low self-esteem, you may need to use many techniques, and it may take you a while to overcome your depression. That you want to have realistic expectations, particularly if your mood problems have been chronic. I'm a great optimist. I believe everyone has the capacity to overcome depression and experience tremendous joy and self-esteem and intimacy with other people. But and often you can learn to do that very, very quickly with the new team CBT. But sometimes it takes a while to find the thing that's going to work for you. Another point, philosophical point, and jump in on any of these that you want, Fabrice, is that happiness, like depression or unhappiness, is never permanent. We're not talking about going into a state of never-ending euphoria or something like that. It's a Buddhist concept going back 2,500 years, the concept of impermanence. Things are constantly fluctuating. I aim to, and I've said this on previous podcasts, but I think humans can aim for 5 happy days per week and 2 kind of unhappy, upset days. And if you don't have your 5 happy days, you need a little tune-up. You can use the techniques we're talking about in this current series. But if you're happy 7 days a week, you're getting too happy, and maybe we have to bring you down with lithium or get you to look at things more realistically, because life has bumps in the road for all of us, and our feelings fluctuate greatly. So what I'm going to be teaching you, and Fabrice as well, are techniques to develop greater happiness today at this time.
So what you're talking about is to increase the frequency and duration of good moments.
Yes, that's right. So, but not to be aiming for perfection, or to necessarily think you're going to learn how to do this, overnight. A third point is that recovery is a term that therapists use that implies you have some brain disease or illness that you have to recover for. I'm focusing more on the concept of enlightenment, really, kind of a spiritual enlightenment where you suddenly experience a selfless state of great joy, great connection to other people. And then a fourth philosophical point is that change is something specific that happens at a specific moment on a specific day when you're focusing with a specific issue. Change is not some general, vague, abstract, ethereal concept.
Yeah, that bears repeating because, as people who've been listening to this for a while know, we can only work in specifics.
Yeah. So if I'm working with someone who's unhappy and depressed and I want greater happiness, they give me a specific moment that you are unhappy or depressed, and then I'll show you how to deal with what was going on at that time. And then once you learn to turn that around, you'll often see a pattern that is going on all the time when you're unhappy. And so the tools that helped you at that one moment can help you in most, if not all of the times when you're feeling down.
The generalization is the consequence of the specificity.
Yeah. Now, today is going to be on the pleasure predicting sheet. This is one of the simpler things you can do to boost happiness. And just by way of brief background, the first time I got to thinking about this, I was on vacation for a month in southern Sweden. I had a Swedish girlfriend, and I had the good fortune to spend a month in Malmö on the southern tip of Sweden and hang out with her and, see a lot of, beautiful sights and had a lot of fun. And but one of the things that she mentioned never left my mind. I think she was kind of struggling herself with kind of chronic mild depression. And she said one of the secrets for her was always to schedule something, to have something to look forward to.
Yeah.
And that kind of cheered her up. And so she was always scheduling, we'll take a trip over to Finland, or we'll go and do this, go and do that. And I noticed that, that is cool. That is kind of a good thing. And then in the modern era of cognitive and behavioral therapies, Peter Lewinsohn was or still is a psychologist in Oregon, and he did a lot of research and actually wrote a book showing that simply asking depressed patients to do more pleasurable and rewarding things, whether or not they feel like it, had significant mood boosting effects.
Yeah, it's very behavioral technique.
Yeah, but and while this technique doesn't probably cause complete recovery, what it does have going for it is that it almost always causes an improvement in mood. And so I took these ideas and turned them into something a bit more sophisticated and perhaps fun, called the pleasure predicting sheet. And I'm going to be posting some examples on the show notes that you can take a look at and perhaps perhaps use. But the pleasure predicting sheet, you can use it in a kind of a humble way or in a more sophisticated way. But it's essentially a sheet with multiple columns in it. One is the left-hand column. You schedule activities with potential for pleasure, learning, or personal growth, and I find it's good to or helping others, and it's good to schedule things sometimes that don't take a whole lot of time. Like it could be something as simple as I happen to like glazed donuts. I don't get them very often, but I could schedule go and get a glazed donut and eat it. And then that's the first column, and then could be jog, could be another activity, and go to a movie with a friend. It can be anything at all. And then in the next column, you write down who you do each activity with. And if you do it with you're alone, you put self, because you're never really alone. You're always with yourself. And then if you do it like with your boyfriend or your sister, your brother, or whatever, you put who that person is. In the third column, you predict how satisfying and rewarding each activity will be between 0 and 100. And you do this on paper. So if you think something isn't going to be fun, you might predict like 5% or 10%. If you think it's going to be tremendous, you might put 80%. And then you go out and do it, and you record how pleasurable or satisfying it turned out between 0 and 100. Now, that's the humble version of it, but even just with that, there can be tremendous benefits for you. For one thing, when people are depressed, I've seen that people often believe that things won't be any fun, so you stop giving up on things. You stop doing things you used to do, like playing tennis, and you tell yourself, oh, no one would want to play tennis with me, or it wouldn't be any fun. Well, then schedule some tennis with somebody and put your prediction, and then go out and see how rewarding it turned out to be, and then you can compare the two. And often depressed individuals will have very low expectations, and then we'll find that things are more pleasurable and rewarding than you thought.
Right. So just to be clear, this is something to be used when you're feeling kind of down and not enthusiastic, and some loss of pleasure in life.
Yeah, and then you just make the decision, even though you might not be motivated, to schedule pleasurable and rewarding activities.
Yeah.
Maybe schedule 10 activities, put who you do them with, and then predict from 0 to 100 how they turned out, and then write down in the final column how pleasurable or satisfying they turned out to be. It's a simple thing that anyone can do to boost your happiness. You don't even have to be depressed to use this tool. It's a real easy technique.
So how does it boost your happiness? You're just recording values, right? So what does it do for you?
Well, it gets you doing things that, rather than sitting around feeling sorry for yourself or giving up on activities, that get you out actually doing things. It also allows you to test your expectations, because one of the 10 cognitive distortions is fortune telling. Yeah. Jumping to conclusions where you're saying, oh, that wouldn't be any fun, or I'm a hopeless case. You're making negative predictions about the future. And in this case, you're testing your predictions. Now, you can use it in a more sophisticated way as well, and I'm going to publish 2 examples of this with the show notes. Once I developed the pleasure predicting sheet, it then occurred to me that you can integrate it with cognitive therapy to test some of your self-defeating beliefs. Right. And I might have mentioned in a previous podcast, I can't recall, but a woman that I talked about in the book Feeling Good, who had been kind of rejected by her husband, who wanted to have an affair with his secretary. Yeah. And so he referred his wife to me, so she wouldn't commit suicide when he found out that she was having an affair. And once she found out that he was having an affair, she did become devastated and severely depressed. And one of her beliefs was, I could never feel happy and fulfilled without John's love. Mm-hmm. And that's so common with almost everybody who's been rejected, whether it's a man or a woman who's rejected you. You tend to idealize that person and tell yourself, oh, I can't be happy without that person. And so the technique that proved helpful for her, after a lot of techniques weren't helpful, which is common, you have to find the one that works. I asked her to test this with the pleasure predicting sheet, and she wrote at the top her hypothesis: I could never feel truly happy and fulfilled without John's love. And the first thing I asked her to test was, what do you think it would be like if you prepared a beautiful dinner for yourself, treated yourself like a dear friend? She was eating peanut butter sandwiches at night and feeling alone and miserable.
Yeah.
And I said, well, but suppose you really loved yourself, what would you do? And so she predicted, as you can see, that if she prepared a gourmet meal for herself, it would only be 5% satisfying.
Yeah.
And she predicted if she ate dinner with herself, a beautiful gourmet meal, it would only be 50% satisfying. She also had a lunch scheduled with her ex-husband, which she predicted 75% satisfying, and also she'd given up jogging, and she predicted it would only be 50%. Well, if you look at the outcomes, when she prepared the dinner and ate it by herself, she was 90% enjoyed preparing the dinner, and she was actually 100% enjoyed eating it by herself. It was a shock to her to discover she could be happy when she was alone. Right. Then she went out the next day and had lunch with her husband, who talked about what a good lover the secretary was and how they were going to get divorced and how he was going to take the house and everything. And it turned out to be a 0. She said it was probably the worst hour of her life, and it just didn't reconcile with her belief that she needed this guy to be happy.
Yeah.
She was actually very happy when she was alone and miserable when she was with him, and then she went out jogging and it was 90%. And this broke her depression, and she then decided, gosh, I don't really need my husband, found a man and fell in love, and then the husband came crawling back, begging for her to come back, and she, told him to go stick it up as you know what, and filed for divorce.
So this is really, it's a reality check.
Yes, it's a reality check. And then there's another example I can give here. I don't think we've done this one that I can publish also with the show notes. Just another way to use the pleasure predicting sheet. Did we talk about this perfectionistic medical school professor?
No, I don't recall this. Yeah.
This was a gentleman who came to me who was quite depressed, but he'd had fantastic achievements, and he was a chairman at a department of medicine or endocrinology or something at one of the top medical schools in the country, and yet he was always unhappy. And the belief that I used the downward arrow with him, which we've talked about on previous podcasts, and he had the belief nothing is worth doing unless I do it perfectly.
Yeah.
And so I tried again a lot of things that didn't work for him, and then what turned out to help him was the pleasure predicting sheet, but I modified it, as you can see on the show notes, and called it the pleasure perfection balance sheet. And I actually wrote about him for the journal Psychology Today years ago. I wrote an article called The Perfectionist Script for Self-Defeat. And this was one of the things they featured in that article. But I told him to schedule activities for pleasure, learning, and personal growth, predict the satisfaction. Afterwards, write down the actual satisfaction, but also put how perfectly you did each activity.
Oh, yeah, okay. So that's a little twist in there.
Yeah, and so he was very excited and brought back 15 or 20 activities that he'd done during the week, but I'll just highlight 2 of them. The first thing he put down is give welcoming lecture to the new medical school class. They would always have him welcome the medical students because he lectured all over the world, and he was very famous and charismatic, and he predicted 90%. Also, I told him, do things that you don't usually do. And so he said on a Saturday the toilet broke, a broken pipe, and flooded the bathroom. And so he remembered I told him to do things you're not used to doing as well as things you're used to doing. And so he decided to fix it himself rather than to call a plumber, and he predicted 10% satisfaction.
Yeah, I would predict the same thing myself.
Exactly, yeah. So then his actual satisfaction of the pleasure with the medical school lecture was 5%. He predicted 90%. And his perfection rating, he put 75%. He said, I only got a 30-second standing ovation. And I said, I lecture all over. I've on occasion gotten brief standing ovations, but this was blowing my mind. And I said, you're only 5% happy with a 30-second standing ovation. And he said, well, yeah, but see, I always get standing ovations, so I time them. And last year, the medical students cheered for 45 seconds. And this year they only cheered for 30 seconds, so I felt like I'm over the hill.
Comparison will always do you in, that's the...
Yeah, this is textbook perfectionism. Then fixing the broken pipe in the toilet, he had predicted 10%, and it came out 100% satisfying. But his perfection rating was only 5% because it said it took him 10 hours to fix it. He had to go several times to the hardware store and buy the tools and get the instructions. But he said by late at night when he finally got it fixed, he went into a state of euphoria. Well, you can see here the thing he did 75% perfection was 5% satisfying. And the thing that he was 5% perfection, he was 100% satisfying. He suddenly saw, yeah, I don't have to be perfect to be enjoying life. And then he went and played squash with his 12-year-old son, and he said, neither of us is a champion. Yeah. We played about 50% well, but it was 100% fun. Yeah. And then he went on a walk with his wife through the woods. He took the kids to Baskin Robbins for an ice cream cone, 100%. Just ordinary things, and it just transformed his value system, and finally broke his depression that life is like a banquet, and he said he didn't give up achievement. He still enjoyed achievement, and trying to produce outstanding papers and books and whatever. But it said he suddenly saw that his perfectionism was like a prison that he'd been in, and that life has so much more to offer. Well,
what strikes me here is this is a version of the experimental technique.
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah, where you're doing an experiment to test your beliefs.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's a more sophisticated way to do it, but just simply using the pleasure predicting sheet, even without a hypothesis at the top. Yeah. That's one thing that you listeners can do to boost your happiness. So if you give it a try this week, use the pleasure predicting sheet, then email us and tell us.
And you're going to put samples in the show notes, right?
I'll put both of these in the show notes, plus a blank one, so that people can kind of download it and use it.
So that's our listeners' first challenge for this week. Go and predict your pleasure and see how it turns out.
Yes, and remember, do a variety of things. Do some things by yourself and some things with other people. Yeah. And do many things that don't take too long. Yeah. So you can get a lot of data.
Yeah, we want to make this simple. So next week we're going to talk about procrastination. Now, I don't know yet what you're planning, but since we just looked at the pleasure predicting sheet, we're going to look at the pain predicting sheet.
Yeah, the anti-procrastination sheet.
Right, yeah.
And I'll be using a personal example of something I was procrastinating on, was doing all my accounting for the taxes, which is a miserable thing, and showing you how I myself use the anti-procrastination sheet. But again, it's something simple that you can do if you want to boost your happiness.
I'm looking forward to it. See you then.
Okay, thanks.
Bye. This has been another episode of the Feeling Good podcast. For more information, visit Dr. Burns' website at feelinggood.com, where you will find the show notes for this podcast under the blog page, and where you can leave your comments and questions. The website has an abundance of resources for therapists as well as non-therapists, including books, workshops, a list of online training groups around the world, and much more. Theme music is Gypsy Jazz in Paris, 1935, composed and performed by Brett Van Donsel. I am your host, Fabrice Nye, and I invite you to join us next time for another episode of the Feeling Good podcast.